What's up, and welcome to another episode of Unmuted. I'm your host, Courtland Warren. Now, one of the very first programs or conditioned ways of thinking or limiting beliefs that can develop for us is around approval, okay, acceptance. See, the reality is that if on day one, go to your birth date, me, September 8th, go to your birth date, right? And on that day that you showed up on the planet, if no one had accepted you that day, then you don't make it to day two, okay? Whether that's the medical staff, family and what have you, right? As human beings, we are not equipped to survive on our own like day one, right? Stick with me here because I'm going to be making a point. All right. So our whole like ability to survive has resulted from our ability to adapt and to fit in, right? To do what's necessary to get acceptance and approval, right? So acceptance and approval early on was how our safety was secured. It is, as human beings, our ability to form community was the reason why we were able to even live, okay? We were able to exist because of our ability to form community. Like alone, we don't have a chance against the lion or like the saber-toothed tiger. Like we can't do it, okay? So human beings are taken care of for longer than any other animal, right? In some, like 18 years till adulthood, right? And then they become adults and we still take care of them as parents, but we get taken care of for longer than anyone else, okay? Or any other species or any other animal, okay? Now, if I'm a gazelle, if you're a gazelle on the Serengeti, let's say, right, you got to come out day one, you got to come out ready to run. Does that make sense? Like on day one, you show up on the planet as a gazelle and you got to be ready to run. Why? Because if not, you get eaten by a leopard. Okay, you get eaten. So the little wobbling gazelle is like, got to be ready to run or it gets eaten. Human beings, we get taken care of for longer than anyone else. Now, why does this matter? Why are we talking about, gazelles and leopards? Well, that conditioned existence that we use to fit in, to get acceptance and approval, eventually becomes one of the things that precludes us from having a life that matters. We get so conditioned to be approved of and to be accepted that we become unwilling to stand out. I was asking ChatGPT, so what is the difference between being alone and being lonely? Whenever you see me put my glasses on, that means I got to read something. I asked, what is the difference between being alone and being lonely? And it responded this way. Being alone refers to a state of physical solitude where an individual chooses to spend time by themselves away from the presence of others. It can be a deliberate choice or temporary circumstance. Being alone can provide a sense of freedom, introspection, and self-reflection, and it allows an individual to recharge. On the other hand, being lonely is an emotional state that arises from a perceived lack of connection or meaningful relationships. It is often accompanied by feelings of sadness, isolation, and a longing for companionship. It goes on to say, it is possible to be alone without feeling lonely, as solitude can be a choice and a source of contentment. Conversely, one can feel lonely even in a crowded room if they do not feel understood or connected to those who are around them. So when we explore this idea of being alone versus being lonely, and what is it that keeps individuals from taking the risk to stand out, to move away from the crowd, to go in the opposite direction of the masses, right? How is groupthink even possible? How is it that a collective of people can have it wrong and no one stand up to say, right, we're thinking about this the wrong way? It is our reliance on acceptance, our reliance on approval, our desire to be part of community so that we are not out by ourselves, because like prehistoric man, prehistoric woman, right? When we're alone, it represented danger. It represented like a threat to life. And so we did the things necessary to fit in more. But now we fast forward to today, and there are things that you want to do. There are places that you want to go. There are experiences that you desire to have. And you keep waiting for the perfect time. You keep wanting it to be perfect. You continue to deliberate on it and think about it and work on it until it gets to the place where it cannot be criticized, where there can be no critique, so that there will not be judgment. To say it differently, we hesitate because we're looking to have it presented in a way where we don't experience the feeling of disapproval. That's why we do it. That's why we do it. And so, how then do we determine that it's okay to separate? Right? If you find yourself in the masses, I've often said that a life of success requires a degree of self-promotion. You got to have a degree of self-promotion. Otherwise, no one knows that you exist. You can have a wonderful product or service or idea, and if no one knows about it, or if those people who are looking to follow you don't know where to find you, then what difference does it make? So you got to be willing to stand out. Now, is it any wonder, though, why more people don't do it? Like, look at how we treat those people who are willing to go, the opposite direction. Look at how we treat the people who dare to be great. Imagine the ridicule and criticism of the Wright brothers, the ridicule and criticism of, Marconi, right? The ridicule and criticism of inventors and entrepreneurs and even scientists and those who dare to do things that have not been done. We don't treat them so kindly. And so as a result of that, more individuals look to be protected by the masses. But then that resentment starts to build. And as a result of that, you can be, as the description just said, you can be in a room full of people and feel all alone. Though there are people everywhere. According to research, we're more connected as a society than in the history of our planet, and yet more individuals feel alone. More individuals are experiencing loneliness than ever before. And I believe it's because of an unwillingness to answer the call that comes from within that says, let's just experiment. Let's just go see how wonderful we can actually be. Let's actually tap in and find out just what we're capable of. And because more individuals don't answer that call, then resentment grows. So what then so it's okay, so coming into the world, it's about community. If no one cares for us, if no one takes care of us, then we don't survive in the day too. But then we get older, and then now it's all of this adaptation. We get older, and it's all of this, okay, how am I, to fit in and get approval? How am I to be liked by other people? What's it gonna take? And as a result of that, I say yes when I really want to say no. Sometimes I say no when I really want to say yes, all for the sake of being approved of and accepted. And yet there is this internal conflict that happens. There's this internal charge that continues to pump and continues to go out, because that part of you that is remarkable, that part of you that has something great to contribute, wants to get out also. And it may mean that you experience going it alone, but from a place of self-reflection, from a place of emotional intelligence, from a place of authenticity and creativity, you go for it. And in doing that, you don't experience the feeling of loneliness. In fact, it can be very exhilarating. It can be very enlightening. And a lot of personal growth and development can happen through that willingness to go it alone. It's very powerful. So then how do you know? How do you know when it's time for you to separate? How do you know that it's time to separate from the herd, that it's time to separate from the masses? How do you know? Well, one of the things that you can ask yourself is, how are you doing creatively? What is your creative outlet, your creative expression? Do you have one? Or do you find that your creative expression is something that you don't actually have time to do? Can you be creative in your vocation? Or does the idea of going out and even being creative sound like child's play to you? If you know in your life that you don't have a creative outlet, I can assure you that the experience of loneliness is growing if it is not already fully present. Where another way to know, okay, well, is it time for me to break away? Is it time for me to separate from the herd, to separate from the masses? Ask yourself, what was the last idea that you were truly challenged on? The last idea that you were truly challenged on, the last concept or perspective that you were challenged on, and perhaps you ended up changing your perspective, but for sure, your perspective was challenged on something that was generally accepted. One of the pitfalls of social media is how your friend selection and friend recommendations are usually tied to people who have similar interests as you. And though there is merit for that, it actually produces more of a fixed mindset in that you attract to you people who see things your way. And those that don't, you may not even know they exist, on the platform, because they look different, dress different, speak different, have different political views, they have different insights, different religious practices or no religious practice. You get the idea. And so it is all not to speak in absolutes, but a big part of it is to control the thinking. So ask yourself, when was the last time you were really challenged on a perspective that you had held for so long? It happened to me as recently as 3 days ago, where a viewpoint that I had, and perhaps, as far as I'm concerned, I'd had the viewpoint my entire life, and it got challenged. And I appreciated the conversation. So look for, do you have creative outlets? 2, you're gonna look for where you're being challenged in your perspective or your viewpoint. Those 2 things being absent, it may be time for you to separate. And then 3, a place for you to look to determine if whether or not it's time for you to separate from the masses is, what ideas do you have that you've been holding on to but haven't taken action on? It could be idea for a business, a product, a service. But if you look in your life and there's an idea that you've had for a long time and you're not taking action on it, that is a telltale sign of the need for approval. So you have a great idea that you don't take action on. We can use justifications like, oh, I'm busy. We can use justifications like that. But in reality, if I believe it's a great idea and I don't take action on the idea, there is a part of me that is afraid of it not being accepted and not being approved. Does that make sense? Okay. So if you find yourself sitting on ideas, right, it's because you're along with the masses and thinking with the herd. If you note that you see creativity as child's play and that's something that you don't have time for, right? Your mind isn't being stretched, new ideas don't flow, keeps you stuck. Maybe time for you to separate yourself. And if you note that you are not challenged on your perspective, if you note that you are not, that you haven't been challenged on an idea or a thought process in a long time, it could be that you're surrounded by people who are fearful of challenging you and how you see the world. It could also be evidence of the fact that you're surrounded by people who, in essence, think the same way that you think. And so, yes, we come into the world and no one does it all by themselves. Okay, we come into the world, we don't survive if there's not some level of acceptance and approval. We don't make it if there's not some level of acceptance and approval. But then our dependency on acceptance and approval can be a detriment to you experiencing the fullness and the greatness of who you are. So you got to be willing to go alone. You got to be willing to go alone. My mom used to say, you know, everybody that came with you can't go with you, because each individual has to pay the price. And that price, in some cases, is the price of being alone. Not lonely, but the price of going it alone. I was reading a quote recently. It said, the first year, they laugh at you. In year 5, they're asking you how you did it. Where can that be true for you? Maybe you have a book that you want to write, a business that you want to start, a network that you desire to build. Maybe there's a place that you want to go, something you want to see, an experience you desire to have. And right now in your current circle, it's laughable, it's criticized, it's ridiculous, it's a dream that's too big, and they're telling you to, you know, get real. But are you willing? Are you willing to be laughed at long enough for the laughter to become applause? Are you willing to experience the transformation that happens through a willingness to go it alone, recognizing that as you do so, you develop resilience. As you do so, you experience transformation, and you create a life that inspires. And ultimately, you can also be a person that has people say of you, thank you. I am so glad that you were willing to pay the price so that I can be inspired by the life that you live. I hope this helps. If it does, don't keep it a secret. Let someone know that this podcast exists. And I invite you to join my mailing list at info@courtlandwarren.com. That's info, I-N-F-O, at courtlandwarren.com. Join the mailing list, and that way I can be in touch with you and it not be, you know, limited by platform. Okay. So thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.